Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a writing coach, a manuscript editor, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one to one with me, and I'm one to one with Margaret John Jankowski. She is the founder of the Sewing Machine Project, and I'm not even going to bother to tell you what that is because I'll mess it up. But Margaret, I trust that you know what you're going to be talking about.
Absolutely, John. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you.
The Sewing Machine Project is a nonprofit based here in Wisconsin, where I live, and I began working on it in 2005. And we collect donated sewing machines, and then we distribute them to people whose lives could be improved through sewing and who wouldn't otherwise have access. So we work locally and nationally, mainly. And we are in the business of funneling sewing machines. So individuals and corporate groups give us sewing machines and we give them away.
Well, you and I met, I can't remember how long ago. It's got to be 10 years or so,
At
if I'm not
least, yeah.
mistaken. And I had been teaching at a writers conference in Edgerton, I think, in Wisconsin, and I was touring, who was it, Hamlin Garland's house, or it,
Sterling North.
as I said, Sterling North.
Yes.
And I was the only one there, and then you showed up, and we ended up talking, I think, the rest of the day.
Mhm.
And I think it was in that conversation that you told me, well, I don't want to put, I'm probably a little hazy on the details, but the thing that stood out is you discussed a divorce, and that is often a fraught situation where the way forward is very faint. You don't really have much light for the next step. And one of the things that struck me is that you kind of took a step of faith. I can't say it any other way.
Yeah.
And something showed up that it just seemed sort of spooky to me. But tell me a little bit more, or remind me of that story.
Well, John, our meeting was such an interesting day. Yeah, it was Sterling North House, and remember after this, the house was closing down, and so then we were like, well, we want to keep talking.
Right.
So we went and had a cup of coffee, and it was pouring rain,
Yep.
and you were asking me all about what I did, and yeah, I was I wasn't divorced yet, but I was heading into a divorce at that point.
Mm.
And at the same time, I'd gotten this idea about that, an idea that became the Sewing Machine Project. And it truly was just kind of like, I mean, the image that I see in my mind is kind of being in this shadowy forest, but I can see one step ahead of where I am. And I would just kind of keep taking the next step because it felt like the right thing. It, and both the two events kind of informed one another. The divorce was kind of in a way forcing me to look at my independence. And the Sewing Machine Project was asking me to take some leaps of faith, and I was taking leaps of faith in both cases. So
What were
yeah.
some of those steps of faith?
Well, I mean, truly, in the divorce situation, I really didn't know what my life was going to look like going forward. I didn't really know. I mean, I was running a nonprofit and working part-time. I didn't know how I was going to support myself. I didn't know just what my life was going to look like. I just really didn't know, and I needed some time to just kind of live in that. And
Was it frightening? Or how would you describe your emotions at the time?
no, it was just very unknown, and it felt like it felt as though I needed to kind of leave it alone and let it evolve. Like I was very careful about my steps at that point because I just didn't I couldn't see a path clearly. And finally I just had to say, you know what? The path is going to be there. I just need to start walking.
And
And
so
so I did.
what were the first couple of significant steps?
Well, I mean, as far as the divorce was concerned, I just kind of stepped forward and started moving towards it, getting the help I needed. But in the Sewing Machine Project, it was, I mean, I'd already begun loading sewing machines in a van and driving them to New Orleans. I was like doing this stuff, not even knowing who I was going to give them to. And even, paging back a few pages in the sewing machine project, I began this not knowing, I just felt this need to do this. I saw a need and I thought, I'm going to collect some sewing machines and get them to people who need them. And it began after the tsunami in Sri Lanka, actually. And I remember thinking, yeah, I'll just grab some sewing machines and then I'll ship them over to Southeast Asia.
What was the connection
No
between
problem.
what was this connection between sewing machines and the tsunami? Why sewing machines?
Well, I'd read an article about a woman who'd lost her sewing machine in that storm. And the article struck me in a deep way because I'm a sewer. And at first I thought, oh, I don't know what I'd do without my sewing machine. And then I thought, well, I would survive without my sewing machine. And for this woman, that wasn't necessarily true. And at the same time, I was working in a shop where I sold sewing machines. And so the imbalance that I saw of people that were letting go of machines and then these people who worked so hard to try to get one, I just thought, well, I could be that bridge. I could get those machines to them. But it was a huge leap of faith because I didn't have the money to send sewing machines halfway around the world. A friend of mine asked me, like, what address are you actually going to put on the box? Like, where are they going?
Yeah.
It was kind of mysterious.
And how did it grow?
It grew because the things that I needed arrived. So when I didn't know where the machines would go, a friend said, oh, I have this contact with the American Hindu Association. Let me give you his name. When I didn't know after Hurricane Katrina where machines would go in New Orleans, a friend called and said, oh, my brother-in-law's the rector at a church on Canal Street in New Orleans. It wasn't even like I would ask for it outright. I would begin thinking about what I needed and then an answer would show up. And it was always something amazing.
How are you able to put into words the spiritual dimension that's involved in here? I mean, is this religious? Is it spiritual? Is it just spooky? What words can you put on this to describe where it's coming from?
It's not spooky. It's not religious. But there is definitely a spiritual element about it. My feeling overall is that my imagination is limited to what I know and what I've experienced in my life. But the universe's imagination is boundless. And so when I'm presented with a problem and I kind of leave it open for the universe to help me, the answers are always something beyond anything I ever could have imagined.
How are you a different person now than you were when we first met, before you got your divorce, before you really got going big time with the sewing machine project?
Oof. I'm real well, we all carry our inside parts, but I'm a very different person. I walk in a lot more of a kind of a faith that things will evolve, and that if I don't know an answer, I just need to wait a little bit. I live my life that way. I run the organization that way.
Would you describe yourself more at peace now than you were back then?
Definitely. Yeah.
Tell me more about the nuts and bolts of the project. How does it work? I know that you certainly need donations, you need sewing machines,
Mhm.
but now you've got it more. I don't know if the word is systematized, but it's it's more of a well-oiled machine, for lack of a better word. So how does it work?
Okay, so we take in donated sewing machines, and they need to be, we have a bunch of criteria on our website, but they need to be in excellent working order. We have an amazing team of volunteers that checks those machines when we get them. We're not a repair shop, so we need people to repair their machines before they donate them. But we make sure, we double check every machine to make sure that what we are giving away is something that will actually be a gift to someone, as opposed to another burden for lives that are already pretty burdened. So we take in those donated machines, and then we have a few different levels of projects. Nationally, we take applications from groups that are helping people through sewing. So it might be a women's shelter or a library or an after-school program. We work a lot with immigrant resettlement programs. And we have a pretty deep application process where groups need to tell us how they're going to do it, who's going to teach it, who's actually going to show up for the classes, what kind of interest they've had. So and also how the people in there, the people taking the classes will pay it forward, they will help somebody else once they learn to sew.
My goodness.
So that's just an integral part. So that's how our national program works.
Are you finding that the need far exceeds the supply?
No, it's another one of those things, John. We get what we need. There's kind of a sweet balance. We receive machines. People ask for machines. We always have some machines. And then we're careful about where they go. Over the years, we've refined the process in how we analyze an application.
What kind of standard do you use?
Well, we want to see that there's truly need on the end, in the population that people are going to serve. For instance, a refugee resettlement program where people have just arrived, and this tool is going to be so valued, is one level. Or a group of ladies that wants to have a separate set of sewing machines to take to the church so they can sew together. We'd be like, no, probably not. Take your machine. So we want to see that the people that are receiving those machines really need them.
Okay. Are there men involved in this too?
There are some, we don't limit it to women, but overall, I find that it's probably 97% women.
Because I don't know nothing about no sewing machines. That's not my area of expertise at all.
Yeah.
But this is something that this has been part of your life, even going way back, right?
Well, absolutely. I've always been a sewer. I learned to sew when I was a little girl, but it wasn't until I was working at the shop where I was selling sewing machines that I was asked to teach classes, teaching people how to use their new machines. And so I did that, and had a lot of willing participants. And then I formed a class that was I called it the white shirt class. Let's all make a white shirt, and you tell me what kind of white shirt you want to make. Okay. And I found that women that were in that class had taken sewing machines in middle school, and that what they learned when they took sewing then was that they didn't know how to sew, and they didn't know how to use their machine, and they'd shoved their machine in the closet, and it had sat there for all these years. And so in this class, they fell in love with sewing, or fell in love maybe for the first time. And I did too. I watched them and thought, oh man, there's so much magic here. So yeah.
So now you have written a memoir that basically captures the story. It's called, let me pull it up on the, hold on just a second. There it is. And let me get rid of that. So talk about Common Threads.
Common Threads has been in the works for probably 8 years. I go out and speak about the sewing machine project quite a bit. And people love the stories of the people who have received machines, and also the story of my journey growing this organization. Some people are there just to learn about people and sewing, and other people are there because they've had ideas that they've set aside because they can't imagine how it could possibly work. And people on both ends are inspired by this. So I have been writing it over the years and writing different stories about different moments in the evolution of this project. And there have been certain points where I've thought, I wonder if this is ever going to be done. But last fall, I thought, you know what? I think it's done now, and it was. So I've been working on it, and it's a sweet little book. Yeah.
So talk about the process. I mean, is it self-published, traditionally published? How did you get it out there?
I worked with a group it's a self-publishing group. It's called Little Creek Press here in Wisconsin. And they do have a bar. You have to submit your manuscript and they decide if they feel like working with you. But they loved the book and helped me quite a bit. So what I loved about the process was that I had so much say in how it worked. So we really collaborated on putting this whole thing together, and the photographs that are within the book were all collaboratively chosen, and the cover art was done by a friend of mine. I could choose how I wanted the cover to look, and I love it. And it's really a lovely process. And then they've helped me quite a bit with just getting the book out there. So getting it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and different places online where people can buy it.
So self-publishing there's traditional publishing and there's self-publishing, and self-publishing has a lot of different varieties to it. I mean, if someone has a book that they want to write, they will get it out there one way or the other, whether you have an agent or not. So talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the particular process that you followed. Did you have to spend a lot of money up front? How did that work, and how do you like? It's only been out, I think, a month or two, so it probably doesn't have as much of a track record yet. But is the self-publishing route you took, was that expensive?
I think it was probably more expensive than some self-publishing options. I know people can go on Amazon and publish pretty reasonably. And I wanted this option because I have put my heart and soul into this book, and I wanted it to look good. I wanted the help that they were providing and the expertise, the editing and just all of their recommendations. And then even now, like there was a line in the book where I felt like a couple words should be in there and they were left out. And because it's print on demand, I just contacted my publisher and said, on this page, I just need these words. And she said, okay.
So you can really update it regularly.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
So if I want to, I mean, that's a big old rabbit hole. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll go through the rest of the book. And I thought, oh no, Margaret, don't go there.
Did you consider trying to get an agent?
I did. And I sent out information about it to some agents and also to some publishers. And I just couldn't find some interest. And I did talk with a publisher just in the spring or early this year. And it sounded as though I could keep pushing it and there was maybe a possibility, but I just felt an urgency about putting it out in the world. I really wanted it out there, and I didn't want to be on somebody else's timeline. So I just said, you know what, my book is done and I want it to be in people's hands now.
Yeah. Is it too soon to get a sense of how it's going over?
Well, so far, pretty good. Yeah, I mean, the people who've read it, it was funny. One of my close friends said, said, well, I read your book, and I was ready to say, Margaret, great book, just because you're my friend. And she said, but I can tell you, Margaret, it's a great book. I think she was a little surprised. But yeah, people have been saying that they love the way it reads.
And it really kind of puts into it sort of solidifies the legacy. The print, the vision that you've got will, in a sense, outlive you. Not that you're going anywhere anytime soon that we know of, but it's like your calling card, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I want to let's remove that. I want to go to your website and show that. And this is a low budget operation, Margaret. So I'm going to go full screen on that. And then I'm going to go to that page. And this is not the home page. Whoops, that's not the one I wanted to show. It's the about page. It's the history. And I think it's an especially good page because it gives your mission statement right off the top. It makes it clear that it's a 501c3 organization. And you have, and some of these pictures are from the US and some are overseas. Am I right?
That is correct. Although we're not doing a bunch of international right now, but we have in the past. So that's where those came from.
Okay. And does that mean that you personally have to do a lot of traveling?
Not really. I've established ties down in the New Orleans area because I made so many trips after Hurricane Katrina. So I go to New Orleans probably once a year at this point, but no, we ship machines to other parts of the United States.
Okay. And then you have a really a nice big picture or a piece on the memoir, Delivering Hope and Meaning Through Sewing Machines, which is that the subtitles always, they always tell what it's all about. This is cool. This was you were featured on the CBS Evening News. You've been, on there's a podcast, the So and So podcast. That's a great title. Great picture of you, genius at work here. And and I mean this is public TV, I think, right? So there's, it's a great website that covers a lot of ground, and I'm very impressed with what you're up to. Talk about the writing process, because you don't necessarily consider yourself to be a writer, but of course you are now. How do you approach the whole writing thing, since that's not your expertise, that's not been your background? Is this like the new you?
Well, I kind of want it to be the new me, John. I really love writing.
Why? What do you like about it?
Well, I mean, my main experience has been writing this book. Right. I loved the process in writing this book of, I'd think of a certain moment that I wanted to describe, and then I would just kind of let myself dive into that moment and try to remember the sounds and the smells and how I felt, like what my gut feeling was during that time.
Did you keep a journal?
Not really. But what I did keep, especially for the New Orleans trips, were I have folders for every single trip. So it would say, it would be like my little hand-drawn maps, because of course I didn't have any GPS. So I was driving around New Orleans trying to find, schools and community centers and different places. So my notes about, like, even my own handwritten directions to myself that I'd put on the seat next to me so I could find things. So I found that when I would take a deep dive, it was surprising how much I remembered about those moments, and also things. I mean, there's a scene in the book where we had rented a truck and I was driving down a street in New Orleans where they have the live oaks and the big sweeping branches. And we drove right into one of those branches, and the top of the truck just went and got like stuck on the branch.
Oh man.
And I realized that was, as I kind of went back through my folders of information, I was like, oh, that was that trip. And then something else had happened. It's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's next?
Well, I think I have to take John DeDakis's writing class.
Yes, you do.
Because I'd like to try fiction.
Okay.
I'd really like to try fiction. Although people that have read this book say they'd like me to write more about the kind of the spiritual aspect of it.
How do you feel about doing that? Do you think there's a book there?
I think there could be. I'd have to give that a little thought. I mean, I think there could be. I think there's a lot. I think there are a lot of ways you can go with that.
Exactly.
But I'd just have to really spend some time thinking about it to see if I believe it.
What do you mean believe it?
Oh, I mean, believe that I have that book in me.
Okay.
I think I do. But
you probably do, because that seemed to be, a very, a clear dimension to me when we first met. I mean, there was a spirituality that I recognized and that you were able to articulate, and it's also very practical, which got my attention. And of course, now there's a track record involved as well. So, but the book itself doesn't necessarily talk about the spiritual dimension.
Right. I wanted to be, I allude to it quite a bit. But I wanted it to be more of this is about the sewing machine project.
Right.
But people who've read it definitely recognize the spiritual aspect to it. So
yeah,
it's there. I mean, it was kind of undeniable. I couldn't really write about this project without writing about that.
Okay. And anything else you want to mention before we go?
I touched on the national work that we do, and I guess it's important to me also to talk about the local work that we do, because to me it's pretty fabulous. So we work locally here in Madison in two different ways. We have classes that we offer in collaboration with local community centers. So the centers identify the people who should take the class. And then we come in with sewing machines and a teacher and volunteers and teach people to sew and use their machines. And then the class pays it forward by doing something for the center. And then at the end, students get to keep the machines that they learned on, which is super powerful. And then also locally, we have free mending, which is really cool. It started in 2015.
Say that again. It's what?
Free mending.
And what is that?
So we have a mending table, and prior to the pandemic, we built up to 3 different sites. One at a community center where we scheduled it along with their food pantry and their free meal program. One was at a local shelter that offered resources for people experiencing homelessness. And the third one was at our local library, our downtown library. And so we come in on a very regular schedule, and we have 2 menders at the table, and anybody can come and get anything fixed. And it is super powerful, way more powerful than I'd ever imagined. And then after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, everything shut down. And now we've reopened 2 of those sites. So once again, we're offering free mending, and it's just remarkable. It's remarkable. And the meaning that volunteers feel from helping people, preserve things that are really important to them, as well as just, the people themselves. People come and sit and talk. There's a whole chapter in the book about it that is just one of my favorite chapters. It's incredibly powerful. So
Okay.
I'm really
It's
proud of
we're
it.
I'm talking with Margaret John Jankowski. We've been talking about the Sewing Machine Project, and you can get in touch with Margaret through that website, thesewingmachineproject.org. I'm John DeDakis, and I've been one-to-one with Margaret. Thank you very much. This has been fun.
Thanks for having me, John.